For the next panel discussion, we are moving to the other stakeholder in the overall health ecosystem, the pharma industry. And to join in the next panel, I would like to invite the following panelists. May I invite Debashish Roy, Director and Head of Pfizer Digital. A round of applause for Debashish. Next, I would like to invite Vishwanath Swarup, CEO of Bharat Serums and Vaccines. Welcome, Vishwanath. May I invite Sanchit Nanda, Senior Director, Global Patient Solutions, Gilead Sciences. Sanchit, yes, welcome. And may I invite Anilkumar Gandhi, the Director of Center of Excellence of DAP Pharma. Welcome, Anil, and may I request Souvik to take over as well.
Hi all, welcome back to the 5th edition of APAC HealthTech Innovation Conclave. Till now, we have seen an inaugural session in which Mr. Naveen Sona, Secretary to Governor Maharashtra, and Mr. Venkat from Dell have shared their inputs on the overall aspects of healthcare infrastructure, technology, policy, and everything. And then we had a panel discussion on the building resilient and sustainable healthcare infrastructure, followed by a presentation by Dell. And now we have come to a very important part of this event, a panel discussion on the future of pharma ecosystem in a digitally transformed world. And as Rajneesh has introduced all of you, I would like to welcome Mr. Debashish Roy, Vishwanath Swarup, Sanchit Nanda, and Anilkumar Gandhi for joining us today. Thank you so much, all of you. In this session, we will be primarily focusing on the digital transformation which is taking place in the pharma industry and what the future looks like. I think pharma industry is one of the industries which have seen sea change in the last 2 years in terms of digital transformation. And so without taking much time, I'd like to ask a question to Mr. Vishwanath Swarup. He's the CEO of Bharat Serums and Vaccines. Mr. Vishwanath, my first question to you will be that, do you think that pharma companies are optimally leveraging digital technologies, or it's a long way to go, or do you think that we are actually using the digital technologies optimally?
There's this WhatsApp joke which was floating around, right? Saying who's your CIO, and somebody answered it was COVID. And not to be overly critical of our own industry, but the reality is any regulated industry which deals with human life, you have to be extra careful before you change the norm. And digital is about changing the norms, right? So I think there was every pharma company had depending on their size, had a 1 to 5 member digital team who were just given busy work, right, at times. And I'm just being brutally honest. And COVID came, and all of a sudden they became the stars of the show. And I think the similar thing we kind of went through. We were just changing, there was a change of management, etc., also happening at that time. So all of a sudden we said, we got into this COVID happening, and what do we really do? And I think I'll break it down into 3 parts, right? I see it in 3 areas. First of all, there is the drug discovery part, right? And that I think is a very controlled environment because it's in-house, it's in a lab, etc., right? And I think strides are being made, but I think as we are becoming Atmanirbhar now about innovation in India, I think that's the lease of life that we need to now take. Using big data for drug discovery, quickly testing your hypothesis, etc. What's the risk? The second piece is around driving, so to say, patient impact. And I think that's the most important one. And I think with the advent of wearables, I think a lot of data is being captured, but how is that really being fed back into the drug discovery process? I think is a question mark right now in my mind, right? And I think somebody was talking about earlier about how do we get this data and make it more actionable. I think that's the question to be answered there. And the third one is driving efficiencies. both internally within our organization and then the go-to market. And I think that's where, we made the biggest stride. I think the first and the third bucket that I talk about, we've kind of made strides as an industry. The second one, I think, is because there are technology players, there are pharma players, there are healthcare players involved, the progress has been the least. And I think that's where the most of the value unlock for the patients really will happen.
Right. A very important point raised by Mr. Vishwanath Swarup. 1, 2, 3, 4 points. If I take a crux of what you have said, that most important part is that how intelligently are we using the data? End of the day, for increasing efficiency. That will give a lot of answers for future. I'll come back to you. Let's have a perspective from Mr. Debashish Roy. He's a director and head of Pfizer Digital. Mr. Debashish, do you think that digital technology has transformed patient engagement approach, especially in today's world, if you talk about the post-COVID era? Your thoughts on that?
Thanks, Souvik. And I think since morning, right, we have been listening to various speakers, getting to hear the various sides of the various ecosystem, right? The key stakeholders. We have listened to all of them, and really thought-provoking and really insightful. And thanks APAC News for giving this opportunity to come and at least share the knowledge that we are. Okay. So coming to your question, Souvik, if you look at the patient journey, right? I mean, thanks to pandemic again, as Vishwanath mentioned, there has been an increased spike of on-demand healthcare from a patient side, right? And by on-demand, I mean patients are looking for solutions at their own convenience, at the point of time they want it, and where they are, right? And there has been an increased acceptance of digital technologies among patients, which I think gives us pharma companies an opportunity to really augment the service offerings when we talk about a product launch or a patient support program, to see how across the care continuum, starting from awareness, diagnosis, treatment, fulfillment, all the way to adherence or compliance, right? How can we enable better digital touchpoints across this to help the patients deliver a better health outcome, right? So that is one. Second, if you look at things from a pharma standpoint, right? Every pharma company, when they create a drug, it helps to solve for a specific disease condition. But this is not the only, this is only one variable of the entire construct which is helping towards better quality of life, right? If you take example of a therapy like, say, diabetes, right? The medication alone is not helping the patient with better quality of life. It is some other factors like lifestyle modification, your nutrition, stress management, which is adding to it. And that is where I think there has been an increased, and we spoke about preventive healthcare in the morning sessions, right? There has been increased acceptance from the patient side to adopt these digital health solutions. And there is an enormous amount of data being created, right, across the spectrum. So for pharma companies, if we leverage that data and use it to create an holistic view of the patient, that will help us with our GTM for product launches and getting these solutions closer to the patients.
Right, right. Interesting perspective. I'll come back to you, Debashish Roy. Let's have a perspective from Mr. Sanchit Nanda, Senior Director, Global Patient Solutions, Gilead Sciences. How are the pharma companies leveraging AI? Or are we using AI more effectively for research and drug discovery? If you can give a both national perspective and the global perspective.
Okay. So thanks to APAC News for having me here. So I'll start with the global perspective, because what's important is we keep talking about AI and drug discovery. And what is interesting is I would talk about 5-6 very interesting cases where at the end of the day there is some movement and output, because what really happens is what all we do, the single most important denomination we say is helping the patient and improving health outcome. So if I look at use of AI in drug discovery, at least there are 5 clear cases where there is a product either in early clinical stage or it's kind of, cross the proof of concept and clinical trials are about to start. Like, for example, not sounding, too technical, designing of the molecule based on, protein structure. Second is identifying, how the drug would identify and, work with the protein. That's second part. Third part is, very, very importantly, what, globally companies are realizing that we are living in a world where the proportion of aging population is going to increase. And matter of 5 to 6 years, even if I give an example of a country like US, the proportion of aging population is going to shift the balance in such a way that even a country like US, where we talk about, the doctor population ratio, US is going to be short of doctors by 65,000 to 130,000. From that point of view, looking at AI to make drugs much safer, reducing the toxicity is another platform. Other piece is predicting the pharmacokinetic action of that particular drug. And last is, repurposing the drugs so that, analog drugs can be used for another use, which have been tried and tested. And talking about the real life, if you see, last year only, one of the first drug kind of, developed using AI technology, a company called HealthTech Healthcare from Germany for cancer. It has reached, phase 1 clinical trial. Or another company, it's an interesting example to talk about, Relay Therapeutics, which got an IP of 400 million. Today they have 3 drugs, 2 in cancer and 1 in gene-related disease, which are going to be, tested and see, the clinical trials. Now, coming back to, the Indian part, from a drug discovery point of view, yes, the journey has started, but it's relatively a long way to go. But what is also, I must say in the same vein is, over a period of time, what we are seeing in last 5 to 10 years, the rate of adoption and the impact technology is making, it is reducing the cycle. So that way, being an optimist, I would say probably, couple of years, we may see some kind of, leads coming out of India, which are taken up, globally.
Right, right. Thank you so much, Mr. Sanchit Nanda, for sharing that kind of insights. Yes, you never know, maybe next couple of years, with the help of technology, we can actually reduce that time gap, which will ultimately help the overall humankind, if I may say so. I'll come back to you. Let's have a perspective from Mr. Anilkumar Gandhi. He's the Director of Center of Excellence, DFE Pharma. I think, Mr. Gandhi, if you can shed some light on the cloud computing vis-a-vis the cybersecurity aspects when you talk about leveraging technology for a pharma ecosystem. Because we are also now working or living in the era of remote working. So these things are very critical. So your thoughts on that, sir?
So thanks again, APAC News Network, for inviting us and having really good interactions and good discussions around this topic of digital technology. Before I go on to the cloud computing, I just want to add few points to what Mr. Sanchit told about. It's really a lot of evolution that's happening. If I go back to my PhD days, there were molecular docking or CAD, which was computer-aided drug design, which was already existing. But what it has changed now actually is that when you were doing that computer-aided design, you were looking at one particular target or a series of molecules. Now, what has changed really is that your ability to look at the entire system, look at multiple targets, look at the entire protein structure rather than just one simple part of it. And the computational abilities through AI has gone so much that you are able to screen thousands or millions of compounds. And this is one of the advantages. Now, we have a huge chemistry, molecules available, chemicals available. There is a possibility through AI that we can scan these compounds for a particular target. And that's where, you can see new molecules coming up. Also, another area really is that, and a lot of companies very effectively using this is to determine the adverse drug reactions. And this is one very important area because you have huge database available through a series of past studies, the history, and what kind of molecules have created what kind of adverse reactions. And there are attempts to kind of model this data and predict in future with the future molecules or the drugs, futuristic drugs, whether they'll have any kind of this adverse effects. So there are a lot of collaborations happening globally. So I think from international drug discovery side, you see Novartis collaborating with Microsoft, they're collaborating with Intel. You see Abbott collaborating with Benovet, which is again AI platform startup. So there are a lot of such collaborations happening. And as he rightly mentioned, there are already molecules in the clinical trials which are arising out of AI discovery funnel. Coming to the national side, in India, we are more working on the generic or Me Too kind of medicines. And in such cases, you have limited scope of using this technology. So that's one side of it because the basic research is done. However, you can also see that companies are adopting technologies even in generic. Like our company is working on a concept of a model drug wherein you generate a lot of data on excipient selection, stability, pharmacokinetics based on simple physicochemical properties of the drug. Of course, the limitation is on the amount of data because we can't have thousands or millions of data there. But the data point, with the limited data point, how you can do this predictive analysis and eventually develop a generic product which is cost effective in terms of development and in terms of time. So these are some of the things happening in India. And I strongly also believe that the computational technique or the capabilities that India has and the AI that we have also picked up, there is likelihood that a lot of discovery that was happening in the West could actually come to us because of the pure digital capabilities. And we might have collaborations happening with West on this. And who knows, in future, we might have some molecules arising from India as well due to this technology. So there is a lot of advances, I believe, happening in drug discovery funnel.
Right. Future indeed looks bright when you talk about embracing technology for the transformation in the pharma sector. Let me have a second round of question. I think I should ask the same question to all of you, and then quickly we can wrap it up. If I come to Mr. Vishwanath Swarup, Vishwanath, so where do you see the journey of digital transformation in the pharma sector going? Maybe next 5 years down the line, especially in a country like India, where we are talking about the population of youth, center of excellences, there's a push for embracing digital technologies. The ecosystem is being built by government, conducive policies are there. Obviously, challenges will be there, but where do you see the digital transformation in the pharma sector going through for next 5 years down the line?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid question. I mean, let me come at it from an overall perspective first. First of all, hopefully we will have healthcare, because today what we have is illness care. We really don't have healthcare, right? So moving from illness care to healthcare is the first objective, and I think it's not very far if we're moving in the right direction. Now, to enable that, like I said, there are 3 buckets that we talk about. If I just go back to that and say, yes, will we all of a sudden become the innovator country and where all the new molecules are going to get created and invented? I think the answer is probably no in the next decade. It's a multi-decade journey. In terms of the second bucket where I'm talking about the patient impact, I think there are a couple of elements. Now, how we've embraced, as an example, digital payments. I was reading last week where now the government is trying to create an open source marketplace to reduce the monopoly or duopoly between Amazon and Flipkart. Of course, somebody talked about the universal health ID, right? I think once these things kind of come in play, and the government, because no one player, either pharma or healthcare providers or insurance, and we are largely uninsured as a country, right? now Ayushman Bharat, of course, is helping us. But once the government makes a push to bring us all on a platform, and our journey is always chaotic initially, right? But somehow then we get there and then there's steady state. So I think once we get this on a single platform, we will be benefiting from our demographic as well, because we are one of the youngest populations, et cetera, et cetera. And with that comes the propensity to use more technology, more digital capability, so to say, or aptitude. And I think once the government push comes in with our demographic, we will actually leapfrog quite a few countries in terms of this journey, right? I think the third area is just the efficiencies. I think given that we are a private enterprise and basically most of the healthcare is provided by the private sector in India, I think that will automatically, given the competitive nature of the market, move very, very fast. So I think it's really the second one which can be a game changer for us, where, you know, the consumer/patient adoption of technology enabled by the government push on a single platform of universal health ID, etc., can really be a game changer for the country.
Right, right. Thank you so much for this insight. Debashish, your take on that, quickly.
Sure. Maybe I'll try to summarize this, right, in terms of 5 key pillars. First, I spoke about the patient, right? Patient at the center. So everything is revolving around the patients. Companies are trying to create solutions which are centered around patients, getting solutions closer to the patients. The second pillar is the HCPs. So we need to go beyond the traditional rep means of HCP engagement, right? These days, HCPs are more informed, right? They are looking for customized solutions. There are companies like Novartis, there are companies like Mankind who recently came up with Netflix, OTT kind of models, right? So we need to go beyond that rep engagement and look at customized content delivered through the right channel at the right point of time for these HCPs. The third pillar is basically around data, right? So data is everywhere. Meaningful data makes a lot of sense. It helps us drive actions, right? So we have to have the right data and then insights and then do the course correction required from time to time, be it the HCP-centric platforms or be it the patient-centric platforms. Vishwanath touched the point of ecosystem collaboration or ecosystem disruption, right? I think for pharma companies, it's always easier to partner with a digital health solution company, which basically helps you quicker time to market and test things, test, learn, fail kind of an approach, right? And the last but not the least is pharma embracing digital, right? So that is very, very important and at the core of it. So it has to be from top down. We need to understand how things are changing, evaluate, and then help deliver that transformational experience to our end customers, be it HCPs or be it patients.
Right, right. Thank you for those insights, Debashish. Let's have an insight from Mr. Sanchit Nanda as well.
So, let's talk about patient and, I'll share an example. So, I'll not name the brand and the company because it's an ongoing program. And let's talk about, pre-COVID and post-COVID. So this is about a product in the area of, orthopedic solution where most of the patients are 50 plus, not so much net savvy. And this program has been running for last 4 or 5 years. Now, if you look at pre-COVID and post-COVID, the number of patients on this particular patient support program have multiplied by 3.5 times. And what has driven that is, amount of internet penetration and smartphone penetration. We talk about, 600 to 700 million. And what has happened is the impact of this is now as measured through a setup of connected health where this particular organization linked the patient, the caregiver, the doctor, diagnostic. The impact has been that in terms of a doctor and a patient getting connected, earlier, it was kind of after 6 to 7 months, patient would stop going to the doctor and the outcome, health outcome, would kind of, get depressed. But now what is happening is in last 14 months, not only the number of patients on therapy have improved, patient outcome has improved, patient getting connected to doctor has improved. And what is also important is patient is able to see the entire thing or patient or the caregiver on his particular phone. And this is a classical case. What kind of difference, if technology adopted with a universal approach, considering all stakeholders, can make a difference to patient's life. And ultimately, that's what we should be standing for.
Universal approach. So interesting, Mr. Nanda. Mr. Anilkumar Gandhi, your take on that?
Yeah, I think because of this digital revolution, the important thing is the patient himself has now much more understanding of the conditions, and he also feel under some level of control. Earlier, what used to happen is either the tests are conducted, diagnostic tests are done, and the results come, and then doctor interprets, or he used to visit doctor and get that interpreted. But with this technology, with the data available in the smartphones and smart watches, he can monitor the situations, and that's where he feels really in control. And that's where there is also it's not just control, but he becomes more aware. And because of this, the entire treatment scenario or healthcare scenario changes. And I think that's one of the key element of the digitalization as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, all of you. Thank you, Ms. Debashish Roy, Vishwanath, Swarup, Sanchit, Nanda, Anilkumar Gandhi. I think in this session, what we got is that kind of insights that where we are standing and where we are heading towards in terms of embracing digital technologies for transformation in the pharma sector, be it drug research, clinical trials, and everything, and how AI-like emergent technologies is going to be the game changer. But as you have said, rightly pointed out that there is a saying that sometimes it takes a year to change things. Sometimes it just happens in weeks. That has been done during the COVID. That imagine telemedicine. We are using telemedicine. We never thought of that in a country like India. Telemedicine can be so popular. I can talk about an NIC app of telemedicine. Not many people were using it. See during COVID how people have used that. I think it's all about necessity, and if there's a necessity, digital transformation is going to happen. No one can stop it. Thank you so much for all of you for joining us today. I'd like to invite Mr. Rajneesh Dey, consulting editor of APAC News Network, to come on stage and hand over the memento and the leadership award souvenirs to all our speakers. We can start with Mr. Debashish Roy, Director and Head, Pfizer Digital. Big round of applause for him, please. Debashish Roy. To Mr. Vishwanath Swarup, COO, Bharat Serums and Vaccines. To Mr. Sanchit Nanda, Senior Director, Global Patient Solutions, Gilead Sciences. And to Mr. Anilkumar Gandhi, Director, Center of Excellence, DFE Pharma. Thank you so much, all of you. Can we have a group photo, please? Rajneesh Dey, you can also stay on stage. That was a panel discussion on the future of pharma ecosystem in a digital